I answer your questions exclusively on YouTube. I try to get on here every week. Generally, I make that, and I'm here this week, so let's take your questions. The first one comes from Sofia in Amsterdam, Netherlands. Sofia asks, Brian, when you first started the podcast, many of your cultural discussions centered on how technology was reshaping human connection and communication. 3 years later, what social or cultural issue are you most curious about now, and how has your perspective evolved? Wow, it has been almost 3 years since we first started doing this program. That's kind of wild to think about in and of itself. But to answer the question, technology is still top of mind for me. And a lot of programs like mine explore the impact of tools like generative AI and chatbots and ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini and all the other AI assistants and agents, and the impact they'll have on the job market and on the economy and on companies. That's a very important topic. I think it's well covered, and most of the journalists out there are asking good questions. We have covered that topic extensively on this show. But one angle that I don't think anybody has really dived into to the degree that we could is the topic of how AI and how advanced technologies are impacting and will impact us in a societal level, in a cultural level, in a non-business level. So one example of this that I think about at a very, very practical level is art, right? There are a lot of people who express their art through the written word, whether it's songwriting, screenwriting, whether it is poetry, whether it is, books. But the written word is a human expression of our feelings and emotions, and there's only a few people out there who have the tremendous skills of their language to write soaring and sweeping content that wraps us all in, whether it is in the form of a book or even blogs and so forth. But that's always been a human task. Now AI can do a lot to help people who might struggle to express their thoughts and feelings, but they've always had the same depth and creativity. How will these tools allow people who take a first draft or even a second draft that's nowhere near as good as the best writers in the world, but now these tools can elevate their writing, maybe not exactly on par with the best authors in the world, but can certainly bring them much closer, and in doing so, bring those ideas, bring those stories, bring those expressions out in a way that they would have been hidden before, simply because the individual lacked the mastery of the language and the ability to put words to their feelings and their thoughts. And if that allows more people to express themselves, and if it allows more people to be heard and to contribute to the cultural conversation, even if it is in the entertainment space where so much inspiration for everything we do comes from, I'm fascinated to learn more about that and about how that will change everything we know about forms of entertainment and human interaction on things like, again, screenwriting, songwriting, that we're confined to a very small group of very talented people. At a very, very high, non-consequential level, you wonder if somebody with the incredible gifts of a Taylor Swift, whose songwriting is one of the most prolific and connects with so many people, could be replicated by somebody else who feels and perceives the world in a similar way that she does, but they struggle to express it in words the way that she can. What if technology can allow more people out there who have the depth of connection that an artist like Taylor Swift has, but can enable them to express it and share it with the world, and in doing so, potentially, maybe not make them as famous as Taylor Swift, but what if it allows them to make a living because they are now able to do something that they weren't before and that they didn't have in their core talent set? So hopefully that's helpful to think about, where my mind is on cultural issues coming into 2026. We're just around the corner from that, and some of the topics that I hope to explore with guests on this program. All right, our next question comes from Rafael in São Paulo, Brazil. Rafael asks, you've always explored global business and geopolitics through a long-term lens. Since launching the show, how has your curiosity shifted when it comes to the balance of power between nations, corporations, and technology itself? That's a good question. How has the balance of power shifted in my view? I would say that there's one big thing that's changed between when I started the show and now, and that's that there's a new administration in the United States, which remains the most economically and militarily and culturally and economically powerful country in the history of the world. But with the change of administrations, it has accelerated, not necessarily fundamentally altered, but accelerated the United States' withdrawal from leadership in the world in key areas and in key topics like security in Europe, for example, or any sort of meaningful leadership on the topic of climate change and climate science. And the U.S. has taken a step back from the energy transition, for example, or from the adoption of new technologies that will accelerate the energy transition. So in that stepping back, that significant stepping back from the United States, we are seeing other countries respond and react to that and trying to fill that void of leadership in their regions. And the shifting alliances, there's nothing that's really fundamentally new from a couple of years ago. What I think is that if I look at Europe, for example, I don't know that the Europeans were all that committed to really focusing on their national security and national defense and funding it. I still think there was a large portion of the political and business elite across Europe, Germany, France, the UK, others, that believe that the U.S. would still be there at the end of the day. And now that's changed. And now they really have an understanding that they have to be able to stand up meaningful defense forces and to steel their economies against the threats from outside actors, and that they cannot count on the United States to be there should those situations deteriorate. When I think about corporations and technology and their role as the United States has stepped back a bit, they've become problem solvers themselves and in some ways acting like nation states. Big multinational companies, whether they're in the AI space, technology space, global finance, they're trying to step in and provide some level of leadership, whether it's through financing or consulting services, or as they try to figure out how they're going to fit in this new world where there are multiple power centers, where they can't rely on their relationship to the United States as the only means of their profit. They have to have good relationships with other leaders around the world. Many of these companies are looking at their global footprint and figuring out how they're going to adapt to a world with multiple power centers and how they're going to have influence in all of those capitals, not just one or two of those capitals, and knowing that there are going to be more regional players to deal with than there were in the past. And look, there's no getting around how different the world is because of the advances of technology in little ways and big ways. But if you ask me, what is one of the biggest things I've seen change in just a short period of time, it is how much more connected the young people of the world seem to feel with each other. And this show is a prime example of that. I mean, if you'd asked me when I launched this show 3 years ago, would I be getting listener questions from the Netherlands and Brazil while sitting in North Texas in the United States? I would have hoped, but I wouldn't have thought that on a weekly basis I could get streams of questions from around the world from people who are listening to a show that they feel is relevant to them, who want to engage with me, who would never have had the ability to do so years ago, who would have never been able to find me and I wouldn't have been able to connect with them. And there's people 20 years younger than me who are spending far more time online than I do, who are connecting with the same groups of people all around the world, sharing a common experience and sharing the same pains and struggles and strifes and life experiences, but doing so from completely different cultures and being able to share all of this in real time. It's almost information overload, and I've certainly talked about that on this program before, but it has accelerated so much in the last couple of years that I think it's a big positive that we don't spend enough time celebrating how much more interconnected the world is. And I'll end on this thought about how I know that there's this interconnectedness that maybe is still being refined. But I look back on some of the protests around the world from related to the conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinians in the Middle East, specifically in Gaza. And while protest movements related to war are not new, they've been going on forever, television images fueled some of it. The reason that I think this round was so passionate, and sometimes the facts got lost in the shuffle of screaming at each other, but the passion came from a feeling of connection. That no matter how you viewed a conflict in the past, you didn't feel like it was affecting you personally. You thought it was a shame that it was affecting other people that you didn't really understand, other people whose culture you had never experienced. But with the advent of social media, with the advent of high-definition video, with phones, everybody with a phone has a camera and the ability to share their experiences from their perspectives and help you understand what they're experiencing. It has made conflicts like that feel like they're in your living room in a way that even television couldn't do before, because television still had a filter. It still had a perspective that was balanced and editors who were deciding what was going on air and what wasn't. But now that you're seeing things directly through the eyes of the people experiencing them, the connection that you feel to those families who are going through this conflict, it is connecting in a way that it never would have before. And that is a way that technology over the last couple of years, especially with the adoption of the TikTok platform, has just fundamentally changed how deeply people feel about topics that they now feel more invested in. All right, as always, I think I've given you more than you all bargained for with these answers, but I hope that they were helpful to you all in sharing my perspective. And the feedback I've received from all of you, including questions that don't make it on the air, is that you just appreciate that somebody like myself who consumes too much information, reads too much news, that you don't have time to read, that you can ask me these questions and that I can filter all of that and analyze and synthesize all that information into a perspective that I can share with you to do with as you please. Take it or leave it. And that I don't tell you what to think. I'm hopefully advising you how to think, to come to your own conclusions. But my mission is to ensure that we all are at least considering each other's points of view, and I try to bring as many of those to you as I can, both through my perspective and the perspectives of my guests. Thank you again for listening this week. I'll keep taking your questions on YouTube. Please subscribe to this channel if you enjoy this content. Please send questions if you'd like me to read them on air and give you a response. info at brianjmatos.com is the easiest way to do that, but you can also direct message me at any of the social media platforms where you can find me. And you can also leave comments on these YouTube videos, and I read every one of them. Thank you all again. Talk to you next time.